I have some sympathy for the leader of the synagogue in today's gospel story. I have some sympathy for him because I'm like him. I'm a worship leader and a preacher, just like him. I know what it's like to be responsible for the worship service and for the preaching of the word in a religious establishment, like a church or a synagogue. Like me, the leader of the synagogue was probably trained in liturgy and theology and speaking. He had been taught to revere the scriptures and to teach them faithfully, especially the scriptures of the law and the Ten Commandments. And I can imagine that he felt a burden to emphasize to his people the importance of the fourth commandment. Thou shalt keep the Sabbath holy. The Sabbath was what set Jewish people apart from other people. The Sabbath was a day that was set aside for rest and for renewal, a day to remember God who provides everything we have. So, no work on the Sabbath, no carrying loads, no cooking, no cleaning, just rest and enjoy God's creation. That's what the Sabbath was about. Now, when Jesus came to the synagogue, the leader of the synagogue was gracious. He allowed him to speak. He gave up his pulpit for the day, and he sat and he listened to Jesus with the other people. But then there was an interruption in the service. A woman appeared at the door, bent over and crippled, unable to stand up. This woman had been afflicted by a spirit for 18 years and had been bent over for that long. And you could see her sort of painfully making her way through the crowd, holding on people to prop herself up and wincing with pain. Someone reached out a hand to prop her up, and a woman moved over to make room for her, and someone helped her sit down. And the story says that Jesus saw her. He didn't see an interruption or a distraction, but he saw a human being, someone in need of healing. And so he called her over and he laid his hands on her. He said, "Woman, you are freed from your ailment." And immediately she stood up and began praising God. I don't think Jesus had to think about what he was going to do. He saw her in pain, and immediately he felt for her and he reacted and gave her what she needed. But then the leader of the synagogue called him out. He says, "There are 6 days in the week to do healing. Don't come to the synagogue on the seventh day, on the Sabbath, to do the healing." The poor man, all he could think of was the rules. I think the one who was really bent over and distorted and warped was the leader of the synagogue. His humanity had been deformed and disfigured. He was the one who needed healing. He'd lost his empathy. Empathy is the ability to relate to another person. It's the ability to put yourself in another person's shoes and see things from their perspective. It's the ability to feel what someone else is feeling. In the book To Kill a Mockingbird, Atticus Finch tells his daughter, "You never really understand a person until you consider things from their point of view, until you climb inside their skin and walk around in it." That's empathy. If you could boil Jesus' teaching down to one word, I think it might be empathy. He said, "Love your neighbor as yourself." In other words, imagine what it would be like to be your neighbor and then act accordingly. Jesus said, "Do unto others as you would have them do unto you." In other words, trade places with the other person in your mind and treat them like you would want to be treated. Empathy. When Jesus saw the woman who was bent over and afflicted with pain, he immediately empathized with her and reached out to her. We see this over and over in the gospel. Jesus empathizes with people. He understands them. He sees things with their eyes. He was one of the people. Earlier this year, the billionaire Elon Musk was tapped to reduce the size of government and eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse. But he had no empathy for the people who would be affected. He actually said, the fundamental weakness of Western civilization is empathy, the empathy exploit. He said, they're exploiting a bug in Western civilization, which is the empathy response. And amazingly, there are actually Christian writers who agree with this, who are saying that empathy is a weakness and not a virtue. A woman named Allie Beth Stuckey is a Christian writer, and she wrote a book called Toxic Empathy. And she says that empathy can manipulate people into tolerating sinful behavior. We feel sorry for someone, and so we allow them to manipulate us. A Christian writer named Joe Rigney wrote a book called The Sin of Empathy. He says that empathy is the greatest rhetorical tool of manipulation in the 21st century. He says that when someone throws a pity party and sulks, and we empathize with them, then we capitulate and give in. And pretty soon we're coddling them and indulging them and enabling them. So he says empathy is actually a sin. I think it's astounding that we even have to answer these claims. How can anyone who claims to be a Christian say such things? It's clear in the gospel what Jesus was trying to teach, which is empathy. And somehow today, what should be a virtue is being turned into a vice. Jesus taught empathy. Everywhere he goes in the gospel, he empathizes with people. He feels their pain. He relates to them. And in a larger sense, God came to earth to live as a human being. God came to earth as Jesus in order to experience what it's like to be a human being, to feel what it likes to be a human being. So in the incarnation, God empathizes with humanity. Empathy is what makes us human. A machine doesn't have empathy. And anthropologists tell us that empathy is what helped make the human race survive, because as human beings learned to care for each other, they were able to take care of the survival of the group and make the species survive. Empathy is a basic human skill. If you want to succeed, they say, you need to have good emotional intelligence and the ability to relate to other people, which is empathy. I read somewhere that if you're trying to be a creative writer, a good exercise for you is to ask this question: what's it like to be blank? So what's it like to be a tween girl with an Instagram account? What's it like to be an ex-convict who just got out of prison? What's it like to be an old person who just went into a care facility? So if you can answer those kinds of questions, then your writing is going to become deeper and your characters are going to have more substance. Well, I wonder what happened to the leader of the synagogue in today's gospel story. When he tried to rebuke Jesus, Jesus said, "You hypocrite! On the Sabbath day, don't you untie your ox or your donkey and lead them to water? That's allowed in the scriptures. And ought not this woman, a daughter of Abraham, who's been bound by Satan for 18 long years, shouldn't she be set free on the Sabbath? When Jesus said this, all his opponents were put to shame. And I just wonder if the leader of the synagogue himself came to realize that he had been wrong and that his rigidity had caused him to lose his humanity. And maybe, just maybe, he became a kinder person. I hope so.